I never thought of the library as a dangerous place. It wasn't the kind of job that kept you on edge. No late-night cash runs, no rowdy customers, just books, quiet conversations, and long stretches of stillness. I started working there when I was 19, a part-time job, while I figured out what I wanted to do next. The Maple Creek Library was small, tucked away in the quieter part of the city, just a short bus ride from my apartment. It was the kind of place where people came to read in silence, where the biggest problem was someone forgetting to return a book on time. Most evenings, I worked with one other person, usually Diane. But at 6 p.m., she left, leaving me to close up alone. That wasn't unusual. The last 2 hours of our shift were slow, and it was never a problem. Before that night. That night felt no different. By 7:30, the library was nearly empty. Only 2 or 3 people left, scattered among the shelves. I sat behind the front desk, flipping through a magazine. The only sounds were the occasional rustle of pages and the hum of the overhead lights. That's when I noticed him. A man approached the desk. He looked ordinary. Mid-40s, plain clothes, a forgettable face. If you asked me now, I couldn't describe him in detail, just that he was average-looking in a way that made him almost invisible. He didn't have any books, which was odd. Most people who came up to the desk either needed help finding something or were ready to check out. Instead, he frowned at me and said, "Some of your books are completely out of order." I blinked. "Sorry." "The back section," he said, voice firm, like he was personally offended. "It's a disgrace. They're on the wrong shelves entirely." I hesitated. Something about the way he spoke unsettled me, but I couldn't put my finger on why. Maybe it was the intensity in his eyes, or the way he stood, too still. Okay, I said, standing up. "Can you show me?" I followed him past the front desk, through the aisles. The deeper we went into the library, the quieter it got. The overhead lights cast long shadows between the shelves. I knew this section well. History, non-fiction. It was the farthest corner of the building, tucked away near the emergency exit. He stopped by the last bookshelf. "Here," he said, gesturing vaguely. I turned, scanning the shelves, trying to see what was wrong. The first few seconds, nothing seemed out of place. Then, behind me, I heard the sound of a door opening. My stomach dropped. That door was an emergency exit. It shouldn't have opened without triggering an alarm. I spun around, my pulse spiking. 2 men. One of them was the guy who had led me back here. The other had just stepped in from the outside. Before I could react, they grabbed me. Panic slammed into me like a wave of ice. It was sudden, too fast for me to process. One moment, I was standing in the quiet library. The next, hands were on me, pulling me toward the door. I thrashed instinctively, trying to break free, but they were stronger. No words, no threats, just force. The door gaped open behind me, the cold night air seeping in. If they got me outside. I twisted, trying to yank my arms free. One of them wrapped an arm around my torso, trying to lift me off the ground. The other grabbed my wrist, squeezing hard. I managed to let out a short, strangled yell before one of them clamped a hand over my mouth. My mind was racing. Who were they? What did they want? Were they going to rob me? Kill me? No one knew I was back here. The library was practically empty. They were dragging me, inch by inch, closer to the open door. I kicked out, my heel slamming into someone's shin. He grunted but didn't let go. Then I saw it. A fire alarm. It was just within reach. I lunged, stretching my arm as far as I could. One of them realized what I was doing and yanked me back. Too late. My fingers hooked onto the handle and I pulled. The alarm blared through the library, deafening and shrill. For a split second, everything stopped. Then chaos. The one gripping my torso let go instantly, turning toward the alarm in panic. The other hesitated, his grip loosening just enough for me to break free. I stumbled back, gasping, my pulse roaring in my ears. They looked at each other, then, without a word, bolted out the emergency exit. I stood there, shaking, watching the door swing shut. It didn't latch properly. My hands were trembling as I lunged forward to shut it, slamming it hard until I heard the click of the lock. Only then did I run, straight back to the front desk, grabbing the phone with unsteady fingers. The police arrived quickly. I told them everything I could, but my memory of the men was blurry. Adrenaline had wiped out most of the details. I couldn't even remember their faces. We checked the security cameras, but there weren't many in that section of the library. The footage caught glimpses of the man leading me away, but the emergency exit had no cameras outside. The police took my statement and promised to investigate, but I never heard anything. After that, I never saw those men again. I kept working at the library, but I never closed alone again. And I never ignored that uneasy feeling in my gut again. To this day, I wonder who they were, and what would have happened if I hadn't reached that alarm. The answer haunts me more than I care to admit, because in that moment, that split second when they were pulling me toward that open door, I knew that if they got me outside, I would have disappeared, and no one would have known what happened to me. I never used to be the paranoid type. I traveled a lot for work, stayed in different cities, and spent long hours in coffee shops and libraries to get things done. It was just my routine, nothing unusual. But after what happened on that trip, I can't sit in a public space without checking my surroundings every few minutes. This all took place a few years ago when I had a work assignment in Bridgewater, a city I had never visited before. My company booked me into a decent hotel downtown. Nothing luxurious, but comfortable enough. After checking in, I took a walk around the area just to get familiar with my surroundings. That's when I saw it, the library. It was huge, a modern building made of glass and steel, standing out against the older brick structures around it. Even from the outside, I could see inside, rows upon rows of books, spacious study areas, and a small cafe near the entrance. It seemed like the perfect place to get work done. Much better than sitting in my hotel room. The next morning, I woke up early, grabbed a quick breakfast, and made my way there. The walk was only about 10 minutes, and by the time I arrived, the city was already buzzing with people heading to work. The moment I stepped inside, I felt that familiar quiet calm that libraries have. The faint smell of books and coffee, the soft hum of people typing, the occasional rustle of pages turning. I headed up to the second floor, found a table near the windows, and set up my laptop. It was the perfect spot. Quiet, a nice view of the city, and far enough from other people that I wouldn't be distracted. For the next few hours, I worked, in peace. At one point, I got up to grab a coffee from the cafe downstairs. When I returned to my seat, I noticed something strange. There was a man standing by one of the bookshelves, about 50 feet away. At first, I didn't think anything of it, just another patron browsing the shelves. But something felt off. He wasn't browsing. He wasn't even holding a book. He was just standing there, facing my direction. And his phone was pointed straight at me. I frowned, glancing around to see if there was anyone behind me that he might be filming, but there wasn't. The study area was nearly empty. For a moment, I convinced myself I was imagining things. Maybe he was just checking his phone. But the way he held it, steady, both hands gripping the edges, camera perfectly aligned, it felt deliberate. Then he moved, not toward me, not away, just slightly shifting his angle. That was enough for me to be sure he was filming me. A cold unease settled in my stomach. I stared at him, waiting to see if he'd react. A few seconds passed, then suddenly he turned and disappeared behind the bookshelves. I exhaled, forcing myself to relax. Maybe he was just some weirdo messing around. Maybe it wasn't even about me. I went back to work, trying to shake it off. But about 30 minutes later, I looked up again, and there he was. Same spot, same phone. This time, I wasn't going to ignore it. I stood up. The second I did, he moved. Fast. He turned the corner and vanished behind the bookshelves again. I walked toward where he had been standing, my pulse quickening. When I reached the spot, he was gone. I scanned the aisles, checking for any sign of him. Nothing. Now I was officially freaked out. I decided I had worked enough for the day. I packed up my things and left the library. But before I walked back to my hotel, I found a staff member and reported the guy. They listened, nodded, and said they'd keep an eye out. But I could tell they didn't really think much of it. That night, I went out for dinner and tried to put the whole thing behind me. It was just a weird incident, nothing more. At least, that's what I thought. The next morning, I woke up early and got ready to head out. As I walked through the hotel lobby, I stopped in my tracks. He was there, sitting in one of the lounge chairs near the entrance. The same bald head, the same sunglasses. And when I stepped into the lobby, he turned his head slightly. Not a full turn, not enough to be obvious. Just enough to let me know he saw me. I kept walking, forcing myself not to react. But inside, my heart was pounding. How the hell was he here? Had he followed me from the library? Did he see which hotel I walked into yesterday? Or was this some insane coincidence? I stepped outside and turned the corner, my hands shaking slightly. Then I waited. A minute passed, then 2. And then he appeared. I saw him through the glass doors. He didn't follow me right away, but he started moving toward the entrance, looking around. That was enough for me. I walked fast, weaving through the morning crowd. I turned down a side street, checking behind me every few steps. By the time I reached a busy intersection, I turned again. He was gone. I didn't see him again that day or the next. When I finally checked out of the hotel and left Bridgewater, I felt an overwhelming sense of relief. I told myself it was over, but I was wrong. A few months passed, and I had mostly put the incident behind me. I convinced myself it was just a strange, isolated experience. Then, one night, I was working late at a different library in a completely different city, Westlake, nearly 300 miles from Bridgewater. It was quiet, almost empty. Just a few students scattered around. At some point, I got up to stretch my legs, walking through the aisles of books. And then I saw him, standing at the end of the aisle, partially hidden behind a shelf. Same bald head, same sunglasses. And this time, he wasn't holding his phone. He was just watching. I froze, my heart slamming against my ribs. For a long moment, neither of us moved. Then he stepped forward. That was enough for me. I turned and walked straight to the front desk. The librarian looked up, startled by the urgency in my face. "There's a man in the aisles," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "He's been following me across cities. I need you to call security." She must have seen the fear in my eyes because she didn't hesitate. She reached for the phone. I turned back toward the aisles, but the man was already gone. Security searched the library. They found no one matching his description. The cameras? They showed me entering, walking through the aisles. But the man? Not a single frame. To this day, I don't know who he was or why he was following me. I don't know if he was real or some figment of my imagination brought on by stress and exhaustion. But sometimes, when I'm in a library, any library, I still glance up, half expecting to see him again. Watching, waiting, and I know, deep down, one day I will, because he's still out there, looking for me, and I have no idea why. I never used to be the kind of person who stayed out late. Even in college, where everyone else seemed to thrive on energy drinks and all-nighters, I preferred to study in my dorm or a quiet cafe during the day. But that semester was different. That semester nearly broke me. I was taking 6 courses, 2 of them being the kind that required more hours than a full-time job. I was also interning at a small law firm in Oakwood Heights, and between coursework, the internship, and the constant pressure to stay ahead, I barely had time to eat, let alone sleep. My roommate and her friends treated our dorm like a social club, blasting music and giggling late into the night, so I had no choice but to find somewhere else to study. Westridge University Library was open until midnight, which made it my only real option. The building was old, tall glass windows that reflected the city lights, high ceilings that made every sound echo, and endless rows of shelves that could make someone feel completely alone even in a crowded room. That Wednesday night, I was exhausted before I even got there. I'd been in class all morning, then at my internship until nearly 8:30, before finally grabbing a coffee and heading to the library. It was almost 9 p.m. when I walked through the heavy glass doors, scanning my student ID at the entrance. The place was still busy, but I knew it would clear out by 10 o'clock. I found a quiet spot tucked between 2 tall bookshelves, secluded away from the main study areas. The fewer distractions, the better. I set up my laptop, plugged in my headphones, and got to work. I needed to cram for an exam in the morning, and I had 3 chapters of reading left. By 11 p.m., the library was nearly empty. A few scattered students remained, some at the long communal tables, others at the computer stations near the printers. That was when I first noticed him. A man, maybe late 20s, possibly even 30, walked into my section. There were plenty of open tables nearby, but he didn't sit at any of them. Instead, he pulled out a chair at my table, diagonally across from me. I felt my pulse tick up. Most people in the library followed an unspoken rule. If you didn't know someone, you didn't sit directly near them unless there were no other options. This guy had options. Plenty of them. I glanced up briefly, making eye contact. He smiled. It wasn't an unfriendly smile, but something about it made my stomach twist. I looked back down at my screen and tried to refocus, but I could feel him watching me. A few minutes passed before he spoke. "Excuse me," he said. I pulled out one earbud. "Yeah? You wouldn't happen to be taking Economics 304, would you?" I shook my head. "No, sorry." He sighed. "Damn. Thought I recognized you from class." I nodded, hoping that would be the end of it, but he kept talking. "My professor's a real hard-ass. Pop quizzes every day." "That sucks," I said flatly, putting my earbud back in. When I glanced up again, he was still staring, and he was smiling. Not with his teeth, just a thin, tight-lipped smile. Something wasn't right. I pretended to stay focused on my laptop, but my mind was racing. Who was this guy? He didn't look like a student. If he was pushing 30, he'd have to be a returning student. But something about him seemed off. Then he asked my name. I hesitated. "Amber," I lied. His smile widened. "Amber. That's a pretty name. You have really blue eyes, Amber." That was when I knew this guy wasn't here to study. A slow chill crept up my spine. I forced a tight smile and nodded, pretending to focus on my notes. Then I did something I hadn't done in years. I pulled up ratemyprofessor.com and searched for any Professor Davis at my university. The only result was an old calculus professor whose last review was from 5 years ago. He was lying. I swallowed the rising panic in my throat. I needed to get out of there, but I didn't want to tip him off. I closed my laptop and started packing my things. The moment I stood up, I felt his eyes on me. I walked quickly to the front desk, where the lone security guard was sitting, scrolling through his phone. Keeping my voice low, I explained the situation. The guard straightened, scanning the library. "Where is he?" I pointed toward my table. The man was still there, watching. The guard approached him, asking for his student ID. The man hesitated, pretending to search his wallet, then his pockets, then his bag. "Must have left it at my dorm," he said. The guard crossed his arms. "Which dorm?" A pause. A long one. I don't remember what it's called. The guard's expression hardened. "Come with me." I watched as the man was escorted out, but he never looked back, just walked out the door into the dark. The guard returned and gave me a cautious look. "Be careful walking back to your dorm." I nodded, thanking him, but my stomach was still twisted in knots. I tried to shake it off, went back to studying for another hour, but my brain refused to focus. At midnight, I packed up and left. The campus was silent. The walk back to my dorm was maybe 5 minutes, but it felt longer. The pathways were empty, the streetlights casting long shadows across the pavement. Then I heard it. A single footstep. I froze, glancing over my shoulder. No one. I started walking faster. Another footstep. Closer. I turned just in time to see someone sprinting toward me. Him. I barely had time to scream before he tackled me to the ground, his hands slamming over my mouth. "Shut up," he hissed, "or I'll kill you." Panic surged through me. I thrashed, trying to fight him off, but he was stronger. He yanked me up by my hoodie, dragging me off the path toward the woods. I couldn't breathe. I couldn't think. Then, footsteps. Fast ones. 2 guys, probably students, came running toward us, shouting, "Hey, get the fuck off her!" The man let go of me and bolted into the trees. I hit the ground, gasping for breath. One of the guys knelt beside me. "Are you okay? Do you need an ambulance?" I barely registered the words. The police were called. Campus security reviewed the footage. An alert was sent to every student, and by morning, they caught him. He'd been drinking at a bar down the street, probably waiting, watching. He wasn't a student. He wasn't even supposed to be on campus. I didn't sleep for days after that. Even now, years later, I still can't be in a library late at night without looking over my shoulder, because sometimes they're watching, and sometimes they follow.